I feel like Loki's just gonna ask to be freed and Luffy will be like, yeah, okay. So I have the same ominous feeling. That feeling that Oda's gonna give us that classic One Piece subversion, where, in any other series, the beginning of an event like Ragnarok would be a pretty big deal and would probably earn its own arc just initiating it. However, here in One Piece land, it could happen in the most mundane way possible, where Luffy just goes, yeah, sure. The only thing that gives me pause for thought here is Luffy himself though. When it actually comes to important things, he tends to be a pretty good judge of character, and he can dissect whether someone is a good or bad person just from vibes alone. And Luffy's interaction with Loki so far seems, quite amicable. He's quite happy and eager to be having this experience, and it's strikingly similar to when he met Zoro at Shellstown. This man who had only ever been spoken about as if he was a literal demon being restrained for the good of all of those around him, but Luffy walked up to him and all he saw was a crew member. So I'm not saying that Luffy's going to ask Loki to join the crew in the very next chapter, although that would be about the most wild thing that Oda could throw at us after this. But what I am saying is that maybe, just very maybe, Loki isn't quite as evil as he's being portrayed to us currently. And maybe this whole destroying the world business depends on your interpretation. Like how right now the Revolutionary Army are trying to accomplish a very similar task by destroying the current world order. Although Loki's interpretation does feel a lot more literal at this stage, it's very difficult to picture him then going on to expand about his disdain for the ruling class. But then again, Ragnarok really was a purge of the gods, so he could definitely be heading that way. But in the case of Loki, I think it's going to take something pretty big to redeem him if everything we're hearing is true. When it comes down to it though, someone's gonna free Loki. We're not leaving this island with him still being chained up to the tree, or if we are, it'll be after we've beaten him and rechained him to the tree so that he can patiently wait for the actual end of the world. So if it's gonna happen anyway, why not make it Luffy? Could be fun. Ragnarok could be fun. And then it would give him the impetus to really get involved with the affairs of the island. But what I'm really interested in right now is the fact that Luffy felt so compelled to meet Loki. Again, in the same sort of way that he felt compelled to meet Zoro after Kobe told him about him. And the idea that Loki was exuding so much strength, or maybe not strength, but willpower and whatever it was that appealed to Luffy, Loki produced it and he lured our Pirate King in. It was sort of like what happened when Kizaru invaded Eckert Island. Luffy immediately noticed his presence. He said, there's a strong dude over there. But Kizaru came to him. And I don't know if it's deeper than that, because very strange events concerning Luffy do happen in One Piece from time to time, where it almost seems like fate very abruptly and not at all subtly intervenes to ensure that a canon event plays out. And it usually comes with a fairly ridiculous explanation. My go-to example of this is always chapter 203, where Luffy is chasing after Crocodile and realistically has absolutely no hope of finding him, but he runs past a suspicious staircase that takes his attention, and he runs down it simply because it looks, and I quote, crocodile-ish. It's like he always rolls a natural 20 at just the right time. Can't find Crocodile? Roll perception check. What's that? Natural 20. And then the DM just has to relent and go, okay. You see a hole and it looks crocodile-ish. But I think that meeting Loki is another one of these moments. There is a reason why Luffy needs to be in this place at this time. But as for what happens from here, and also a bit of background as to how we got here, I did receive a comment explaining how Loki's introduction ties into Norse mythology from Gapthrosnir, and I think it's well worth repeating here. In mythology, Loki was bound under the world tree by chains crafted by dwarves. Poison periodically dripped on him, causing him to scream and yell in pain. And that is what caused earthquakes and landslides. The reason for him being chained was also because he caused the death of Balder, by tricking the blind god Hoder into shooting him with the one thing that could harm him. He did this because he was jealous of Balder and what he had, and it's when Loki breaks free of these chains that Ragnarok begins and the end of all 9 worlds come, culminating in Surtur swinging his giant sword of fire in his death throes and reducing the world tree and all of the worlds to ash. So that's pretty cool because it does explain that big old sword. It's very potentially going to be used to destroy Elbaf. And I think that there's a non-0% chance that Elbaf ends with the complete destruction of the island. Perhaps making the giants refugees and forcing them to become involved in the affairs of the world, perhaps even helping Luffy to enact the dawn of the world, which, if the flooding theory is correct, might even reveal some sort of sacred giant's land that was lost in the flooding long ago. But while we wait for that to happen, I'd like to reveal to you, the calm belt, which is a channel currently undertaking the project of re-editing the Grand Line Review video library into themed compilations. Very long videos perfect for your very long form activities like driving, drawing, gaming, sleeping, whatever it is you do for extended periods of time, we've got you covered for as long as it takes, with no need to pause what you're doing and pick a new video every 15 minutes or so. They're not just compilations either, because throughout the years there have been what I refer to as lost videos, and these are Grand Line Review projects that were fully written, recorded, and edited. However, for various different reasons, were never published. I'm not going to tell you where they are, how many there are, or even what they are though, because that's not really in the spirit of One Piece, is it? My videos, well, they're yours if you want them. I left everything I own in the link in the description. So if this new long-form channel meets your needs, then please do check it out and make sure to subscribe, because that is insanely important for small channels, and I look forward to seeing you there. But for now, let's get back to you, me. Thanks, me. It seems like every arc antagonist's height keeps on increasing. So I really tried to restrain myself from talking about this in the last video, because I feel like I've brought it up so often in the past. But look, you're gonna hear it again because it keeps being relevant. And Loki's size is a big thing that points to him being the next major antagonist. To keep Luffy feeling like an underdog despite how stupidly powerful he is, Oda has been purposely scaling his villains up over time. Doflamingo being 2 Luffy's tall, Katakuri was 3 Luffy's tall, Kaido was a whopping 4 Luffy's tall, and now we have Loki, who is at least 5 Luffy's tall, if not Luffy's more. Could be lots more than that, because surprisingly, Kaido isn't all that big. He looks big, but only in comparison to Luffy. If you put Kaido next to a giant, he actually looks hilariously small. But we are continuing the height trend here. The higher Luffy's bounty goes, the taller and wider his opponents become. With Loki, though, to me, he's the first giant who actually feels like a giant, if you know what I mean. We've met a ton of giants in the series, but they've never felt as threatening as I think a giant should. Dory and Broggy were taken out of action rather sneakily on Little Garden, and Hajrudin was one shot on Dressrosa. Even the numbers on Wano are pretty disappointing and easily dealt with. Really, the only giant who's ever posed a proper threat at this stage was Oars. But this Loki is the first standard giant who has made me feel the overwhelming power that a giant should have. Like if I encountered a giant in the wilds of Sydney. And the idea is that Loki, he's not scaled to my power, he's scaled to Luffy's power. This is Luffy, but on a much bigger scale. I said this in the last video, but I need to keep praising this 2-page spread because it's pretty amazing to be able to make Luffy, Emperor of the Sea, feel so small. Not just in stature, but in power as well. The way the spread is drawn tells me that if a fight were to start right now between Luffy and Loki, then we could be in actual trouble, and instead of doing that, what we should do is turn around and walk, if not run away immediately. In better news though, this revelation of Loki ticks one of our Bing boxes, and we are now threatening a column for Bing, although it does rely on the return of NL happening in the next 5 chapters or so, which I feel is a pretty big and unreasonable ask. I've also spent a lot of time talking about big people in this video, but I do need to give some appreciation to the smallest people, which is Usopp, and in this chapter he is doing his very best to step up. After realizing that he has actually set foot on Elbaf, he is not messing around anymore. He's doing his best to project the bravery he so desires, and in fact the bravery that he feels he needs to even be worthy of existing here. To him, I imagine that this borders on being a religious experience, because Elbaf is very much like a sacred ground that only the worthy are given the privilege of walking, or alternatively, it's like being in a church. Even if you're not religious, if you're in the church, you're still probably going to abide by their rules and customs. And being a brave warrior is the custom of Elbaf, which Usopp is trying his hardest to respect, and I just wanted to give him that recognition because, look, he needs something after the cat incident. But the other Straw Hat I'd like to single out is Nami, because her reaction to Elbaf was by far my favorite. I think it really says something when the Navigator is overwhelmed by distance and scale. Nami is by far the strongest geographical mind within the crew, and even she is pushed to dizziness by the outrageous size of Elbaf. Loki and Hajrudin being brothers was not what I expected. So this is a massive thing that I skipped over in the last video because Loki himself stole every unit of focus that I had. But this chapter reveals that Hajrudin is also a prince of Elbaf, and not only that, but we know that he is the eldest prince and rightful heir to the Elbafian throne, I suppose. Don't quite know how all of that works yet, doesn't matter for now. What matters is that Loki seems to have rather ruined everything by claiming the legendary devil fruit that's supposed to go to the rightful person that inherits the things. But all of this makes Hajrudin's time on Dressrosa much more compelling and understandable. He traveled to and participated in the Corridor Coliseum to win the Mera Mera no Mi, assumedly attempting to source the most powerful devil fruit he could to combat combat Loki and protect Elbaf without the inherited legendary fruit. But it may not have just been power that Hajrudin was after. The Merimera no Mi also could have held great thematic importance, because I have made a video on the idea that Ace was a false sun god in the One Piece world, someone that fate built up as a mask for Luffy, because when you look at Ace, everything was pointing in the direction of him being the one to fulfill our Dawn of the World prophecy. And his devil fruit was a huge part of that, because it allows him to conjure light wherever he goes, and even quite literal miniature suns. So assuming that the legendary Elbaf fruit has some connection to this sun godliness, then Hajrudin may have seen this as the next best option. And in retrospect, Hajrudin's status seems to be pretty stupidly obvious though, because he came into this story claiming that he would become the king of the giants. But I think that any royal speculation of Hajrudin was pretty masterfully hidden by Oda, because he showed child Hajrudin in the village as part of the Big Mom flashback. Which, and I guess I can't speak for everyone, but definitely gave me the impression that he was from the less well-off part of society. But I guess this shouldn't be too surprising, because there's a lot of royalty within the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, and indeed within the Straw Hats themselves. Nefertari Vivi, who was brought up in this chapter, but of course we have Vinsmoke Sanji, Prince of the Germa Kingdom. There's also Cavendish, Prince of the Bourgeois Kingdom, and also Sai, who isn't technically royalty of the Kano Kingdom, I guess, but he is the inherited generational leader of their navy. And I suppose this means that Hajrudin is going to be the Momonosuke of this arc, just hopefully a lot more useful because he's not a child. The road arc also served as an excuse to give the Straw Hats their new Elbaf outfits. I imagine it would be quite hard to find normal human-sized clothing in a giant country. That's very true, actually. Say what you want about Road, however maliciously you want to say it, but you have to admit that this dude has pretty good taste in clothing and a solid future in fashion. I'm even starting to come around to Zara's outfit. I'm still not loving it, but I'm not hating it as much as I did. But this does raise a question for the rest of the crew, which is that when they arrive at Elbaf, how are they going to get their outfits? Maybe after discovering what Road did, he'll be comically browbeaten into dressing the rest of the crew as penance for his hobby crimes, which would also be a good excuse to have an outfit for Robin that's, more on the risque side of the scale, because Road is a pervert. Of course he's gonna dress Robin like that. Don't blame me, Eiichiro Oda, the author. I have no control over these characters that I created. So much stuff mentioned that I don't think anyone realized that Elder Jarul is still alive. That's right, Jarul is alive and well, having survived his own personal fire festival. In case you don't remember, Jarul, I guess just Jarul, was one of the elder giants in Big Mom's flashback, the Mountain Beard Man, who was a co-captain of the giant warrior pirates with Jarul in an era long before Dory and Broggy. In fact, Jarul is definitely over 400 years old at this point. According to the One Piece timeline, he was born 408 years ago, so I guess that makes him 408. And to put that age into perspective, Jarul was born around the same time that half of Jaya was shot into the sky, and certainly lived on this planet at the same time as both Noland and Kalgara. So he's someone I'm very interested in, because he's one of the rare people on this planet who still has potentially a very strong link to the Void Century, considering that his parents may have, and that his grandparents definitely did, live during the Void Century. So he could have all sorts of second-hand knowledge that's been lost to humanity for like 40 generations now. The Loki we saw in this chapter barely resembled the silhouette we got years ago. Only the curly hair looked the same. So the Loki silhouette happened, and I'm surprised it was this recently actually, but we first saw it 7 years ago. To me, it feels like a lot longer. But the reason why it looks like this is likely because at the time, Oda not only didn't have a specific design in mind, but he also probably hadn't figured out Loki's personality or greater role in the story yet either. I know it's probably blasphemous to say that this wasn't planned out a decade in advance, but that's Oda. And that's why silhouettes very rarely match the eventual character designs. Because it's like Oda as the author can see an important character off in the distance, but as the author they're still so far away that he hasn't met them yet, he doesn't know them. So he visually manifests them as best that he can, which is often vague and quite inaccurate. And I might make a separate video about this at some stage because this is fascinating. But I've recently been made aware that a couple of years ago in Japan, there were very credible industry rumors being spread that we probably wouldn't even be having an Elbaf arc, and that's why Oda's prediction for the end of One Piece was so short during Wano. Because remember, in 2022, Oda said that he was planning on ending One Piece within 3 years, which even if he did skip Elbaf, I don't think would have been possible, because next year is that original end date. But this is something I need to look into a bit more, especially because the reason for Oda's 2-week break was cited as researching and gathering ideas for Elbaf, which makes the whole not part of the original plan idea seem a bit more credible. And from what I've seen so far, these rumors are genuinely quite credible as well. But what whatever it turns out to be, I'm incredibly glad that we're here, and I don't remember the last time that I've been more excited to sign a year or two, and even more of my life away to a fictional pirate island. I mean, honestly, you could take as many years as you need, Oda, because I cannot wait to see more from this majestic location.